Now we are going to learn what is gradient and how do I find the gradient of a line. So when I talk about gradient, gradient basically means the slope. So there are three ways to find the gradient of a line. The first way is through the graph. The second method is gradient of a line means rise over run. And the third way to find the gradient is we find change in y over the change in x. That means we do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Let's do one by one. When I talk about gradient, gradient means it measures how steep the line is. If you look over here, this line is going upwards from left to right. So if it is going upwards from left to right, and you see this is a very steep upward slope, that means its gradient is positive. If the line is sloping downwards, so it will slope downwards from left to right. Everything happens from the left to the right. You should know this. So if it is going upwards from left to right, it will have a positive gradient. If it is going downwards from left to right, it is having a negative gradient. If the line is completely flat, that means the gradient of the line would be zero. By now you would know that the equation of a line is y is equal to mx plus c, where c denotes your y-intercept and m is going to be your gradient. The gradient will tell you whether it is moving upwards or whether the line is moving downwards. So if I see over here, we have to find the gradient of the line. If I want to find the gradient of a line, take any point on the straight line or the line that is there on your graph. From there, you go anywhere. So for every one movement over here across, take the point and go towards the y-axis. So every one movement to the right is giving you one movement on top. So here the gradient of your line is 1. Okay. If you see, two movement across is going to give you movement 2 upwards. That means it is 1. Gradient of the line is 1. 2 across is going to give you 2 upwards. So the gradient of your line is 1. If you see over here, one movement across gives you one movement upwards. The gradient of your line is nothing but it is a positive 1. So you see, you go across to the right, you go across to the right, and then you go upwards to on the plane, on the line. So one movement across gives you one movement upwards. Why I am saying upwards? Because the line is sloping upwards from left to right. So the gradient is 1, or I would say the gradient is positive. If you look at another diagram, the second diagram over here, take any point. I'm taking this point. One movement across gives you approximately half movement upwards. So the gradient of the line is 0.5. Movement across, okay, the movement rise over run. So the gradient of the line is 0.5. When I say my gradient is nothing but it is rise over run. So the rise is 0.5 and the run means across, run. Rise means upwards. So rise over run. So the run is 1 and I say the gradient of my line is 0.5. This is how you calculate gradient. There is another way to calculate gradient. I will repeat again. The equation of my line is usually y is equal to mx plus c, where m is nothing but your gradient, or I would say it is telling me how steep the slope is. If m is positive, it is going to move upwards. If m is negative, it is going to move downwards. Okay, c tells you your y-intercept. Please keep on writing and solving along. If I take over here, it is flat, there is no slope. So your m, your gradient would be 0. If I see over here, it is sloping downwards, negative. So the gradient of my line, my m, is going to be something negative. It is going to be rise over run. Now you see over here, if I take any point, take some point from where you get exact numbers. If I move one side across, it is not going to go upwards, okay? But it is going to go down. So this tells me that this is a negative slope and my gradient is going to be negative. Another way to find out my gradient would be rise over run, or I would say it is change in y upon change in x. One more thing to remember, that gradient of a horizontal line is always 0. Okay? Over here, since the line is sloping downwards, it is going to have a negative gradient. If you look over here, take any point, go horizontal across. This slope is moving downwards from left to right. Since the slope is moving downwards from left to right, the gradient would be negative. Okay. In this case, you're not going to take it over here because from here you can't go from here. So one movement across is going to go downwards. How many places? 2 places. So the gradient is negative. This is how you find gradient, by looking at the graph. So I would say rise over run. But here there is no rise. My rise is negative and the run is 1. That means across is 1. So my gradient of the line is -2. Okay. So this is how I find my gradient. Another way to find gradient is using formula. First way, rise over run. Other way is formula. That means change in y over change in x. So finding gradients using coordinates, you will be given coordinates of 2 points, say A and B. The x coordinate of A is x1, y coordinate of A is y1, x coordinate of B is x2, y coordinate of B is y2. Find the gradient between the points. This is 1 point and this is second point. It is easier to work out if you put the bigger number in the second set. So if I see my bigger number is over here, so I will put it in my second set. So over here I would say this is x1, this is y1. Here this is x2 and this is y2. If I find out the gradient of my line, it is change in y over change in x. Change in y is y2 minus y1. Change in x is x2 minus x1. Now I said my y2 is 12. Y1 is 3. 12 minus 3 over x2 is 8. x1 is 2. So y2 minus y1 or x2 minus x1. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So this would give me my gradient of 9 over 6. And if you put it on the calculator, you will get your gradient as 1.5. You can try this. Even if you are unable to spot coordinates with the higher one, you can take any set of points as x1, y1 and the other as x2, y2. Okay. Since over here I see this is having a bigger one, so here I will take this as x2, y2 and I will take it as x1, y1. However, it is not compulsory to do so. To find the gradient of a line, you use the formula change in y over change in x, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Y2 is 7 minus y1 is minus 2. Do not forget to put this in brackets. It is very important that you put this in brackets. So y2 minus y1 over x2. What is x2? 11 minus x1. x1 is 8. So my gradient is positive 3. It means this line is going to slope upwards from left to right. This is how you find the gradient of your line. Gradient of your line is change in y over change in x. Suppose you're given a line and they've given you two coordinates and they ask you to find out the gradient of a line. The coordinates over here, one is 0 minus 1, the other is 4 minus 7. I will take this as x1, y1. This coordinate would be x2, y2. So the gradient of my line would be gradient, or I would say m is y2 minus y1 over x2. What is my x2? My x2 is 4. Minus x1 is 0. So it becomes minus 7. Minus into minus is plus 1 over x2 minus x1. 4 minus 0 is 4. So it becomes minus 6 by 4. So the gradient of my line is minus 3 by 2. Or you can find it in decimals and plot it if they ask you to. So it is what? Minus 1 by 5. Here are some examples. Find the gradient of line L. Rise over run. So first I will run. Let's see. This is the line. It is sloping upwards or downwards. It is sloping downwards from upwards, from left to right, from left to right, left to right, upwards. So gradient of my line is going to be positive. How do I find the gradient? Rise over run. Now, can I move this side? No. I need to run first. So run. Take point where it's easier. So I'm taking over here. So if I'm finding the gradient of your line, it is very easy. Rise over run, rise over run, rise over run. Run, every one movement across gives you 3 movement upwards. Rise over run, gradient is plus 3. Your line is moving upwards from left to right. Line moving upwards from left to right. Take any point where you can go across. Run, for every one movement across, you get 2 movement upwards to the point on the line. So it is 2 by 1. The gradient of your line is 2. Here, for one movement across, it's going 1, 2, 3, 4 movements upside. Rise over run, your gradient is 4. Similarly, you will try this sum. And the next sum, I'm pasting the answers for you. Across, upwards. So the rise is 0.5 and the run is 1. So gradient of your line is 0.5 or half. Find the gradient of the line that passes through 2, 1, 5, 10, two coordinates. You use the formula y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Try to give the numbers bigger ones as the second part. Y2 is 10 minus y1 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. You get the gradient of your line. You can pause, try, come back, check. Pause, try, come back. If you see your x1 is minus 3 over here, putting this like this is very important so that you don't mess up with the signs. You're going to try question number 10, 11, 12, 13. They are all the same. They're all the same. You just need to practice. Here the gradient is minus 2. Self-evaluation is very important. Question number 15. Here your gradient is minus 1.5. Now this is a different type of a sum, so I will do it. Line AB is passing through the points A. So this I'll make it x1, y1, x2, y2, and the gradient is 5. Work out the value of k. So I know gradient of a line M is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Y2 is k. Gradient is 5. Y2 is k. Minus y1 is minus 1 over x2 is 6. X1 is 2. So this becomes 5 is equal to k. This minus and minus would make it plus k plus 1 over 4. Now I'll cross multiply. So it becomes 20. 5 fours are 20 is equal to k plus 1. So k is equal to 19. You can try this sum for yourself. Answer is minus 1. A similar type of sum that comes for gradient. You have to work out the value of k and the gradient is given. So you will write the formula m is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So your k is 20. This is all regarding gradient of a line.